Hey everyone, I'm Aaron Potratz.
And I'm Nathan Hawkins.
We are the Shrink
Shrink
Think
Think Podcast,
Podcast.
baby.
Enjoy the show. All right. Start record. Hey everyone, welcome to the Shrink Think Podcast. We are, as always, very excited to be here with you today. Do you know what the role of spirituality is in therapy? That's a really good question because, it's a really hot topic and we're going to do our best to really kind of stay above it all. We're not trying to get political with any of this, like be divisive or be even really that specific. We're just generally wanting to talk about, like, does it have a role? And if it does, what is the role? Because generally speaking, a lot of people think that psychology and religion or faith, spirituality really have no business being in the same bed together. But we're here to tell you that
Get cozy.
you can have as much fun under those sheets as you want.
Boy.
So if that's not a teaser to listen, I don't know what is. So what is the role of spirituality? So generally speaking, we're not trying to speak to a specific faith or religion or spiritual practice or whatever, a belief system at all. We're really just generally saying, does it have any role and how does it interact with psychology, if anything at all? So I guess to start for me, I would like to say that yes, absolutely, 100%, it has a role, whether you like it or not. And here's what I mean by that. If, let's say, you are a client and you've got some faith belief and you want to visit a therapist and get some help with your psychology, your mental health, relationships, whatever, and that person does not have any kind of a faith belief system, they can help you, but at some point you might run across like a values difference that really comes from your faith belief system that is significant and meaningful, and that might limit some of the scope of what can happen or maybe how that happens in the therapy office, and that might create a little bit of an issue that might need to be addressed. Or on the other side, let's say you're a client who absolutely does not have any belief system. Maybe your parents were like overly zealous, really strict religious people, and you're like, hell no, that's not me, right? And you want to go to a therapist, and you're like, you better not have you better not even have heard of any religious system. and if the therapist
Have you walked by a church before?
Right? Can you spell church? You better spell it wrong. And if that person has any kind of a belief system at all, that might be an issue for some people because they are making assumptions or believing that that means you're going to do certain things or lead in a certain way or guide in a certain way or whatever, do something that's going to affect my care that I don't want, right? So that's what I mean, is like there's nothing specific about that. It just simply means that there is a role that's being played there and it's affecting things, I guess, to start with.
There is actually an opposite side of that too, because I've been approached because my faith background is I'm a Christian. If you haven't followed the show or whatever, you probably would know that. But the reason why it applies in this example is because I had a person come in who was a part of a toxic religious system. They were raised Christian. They had become atheist, but a lot of their friends were Christian, and so they wanted me. They were also kind of I can't get too specific, but they were involved in actually in church, in a church setting, like as a job. So it's this weird scenario where like they have been so inundated with it that they were in a job doing it, and they would have like probably. They're not the only reason why they're interested in me. It was because I am a Christian, and they wanted me to already understand how the church system works, because that was their problem. But they also were atheists, so they didn't want to talk about beliefs from the standpoint of like I want to work out my beliefs. It was more like they just were like wanting to for me to just understand things up front. And I would add, it's kind of the same thing of like why somebody would go to, like a person in the military would go to a counselor that maybe has been in the military before, because
Or worked with a lot of people in the military, for example.
right, yeah, because there's a bunch of stuff like acronyms for all kinds of things that they don't be like, oh well, we were at the LZ. Well, it's what does that mean? It's a landing zone. You know, like they don't have to explain all that stuff. So just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, so how do these two things, psychology and like faith, spirituality, how do they interact together? How can they interact? What I would like to pitch to you is that we are human beings that can and do have a spiritual side of things, and that doesn't necessarily have to interfere with or like be opposed to psychology. Psychology can play a role and have a certain place in your life, and we can deal with that clinically. And then, if you had any kind of a spiritual belief at all, that can be helpful as well. So I'll give you an example. Somebody comes in and they've got some sort of a religious belief, or they're spiritual in some way, and so it's not just. And I'm gonna be kind of generic or general here, because I'm not trying to get into any specific belief system here. I'm not talking about Judaism or Hinduism or Christianity or anything. Or like I'm just simply talking
Or even
about,
atheism. Actually.
yeah, and really nothing. So let's say you come in to therapy and you've got some anxiety, right? And it's a legitimate like anxious situation. It's like textbook panic attacks or social phobia or something like that. That's anxiety related. And as you're going through your work, because you are a spiritual person, there's some part of you or some aspect of your care where you're talking with your therapist, and it's important to you to know or to feel like you can lean on like the support of a higher power of some kind. And again, another example of this would be if you're going through some sort of a substance abuse recovery program, and you're going through the steps and you're leaning on some higher power. Some people, that's a god, and some people that's the doorknob, right? Whatever your higher power is, like you're leaning on something else. That's like what I mean about spirituality can play a significant role, because where psychology is like very, and this may sound weird, but it's like very concrete, even though it's abstract, it's very concrete, right? Like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and doing some of those kinds of things is very practical in some certain ways. Spirituality is kind of more abstract. It's like, connection or relationship with the cosmos or with the universe or with an energy field or with a god, a being that is invisible, kind of a thing. And so from that standpoint, it seems like those two would not play well together, but they actually can, to where, you're doing all these practical things for anxiety. You can also encourage clients to connect with or lean on some of their spiritual beliefs and practices, like meditation or prayer, or some sort of a scripture reading of some kind, to ground their thoughts, to calm the anxiety, to soothe some of the like aloneness feelings that people might feel, that actually does physiologically have a significant effect on the body. I remember seeing, and it's a little anecdotal, but seeing an Instagram reel that was talking about, I can't remember who this was. It was somebody very, very, very famous, like a Warren Buffett, somebody like everybody in the world knows who this person is. They said, there was some study done that people who believe that there is some sort of a higher power, like live longer or have more peace or something like that. And so he was like, well, I don't, but I want to at least believe that I do, because I want those effects. So he started pursuing, some sort of a spirituality, because he wanted the reward of like, well, I want to feel peaceful, I want the significantly more like calm demeanor than people who don't have some sort of a belief or whatever. And then his response to that was like, after a couple of years of doing that, I realized I actually do believe in this thing, and I do feel that way. So, I mean, he's kind of anecdotally proving that it's true. But that's my point, is a lot of times when people have some sort of a spiritual belief and they want to bring that into session, it can be really, really helpful.
So if you think of psychology, like Aaron was saying, it is the science, the empirical way of trying to demonstrate the interaction of the mind based over a standard, right? So over a large group of studies. So like you take a bunch of humans, you ask questions, and you should get similar answers based on similar experiences and blah blah blah. So they are measuring essentially your behavior based in a context, whatever that happens to be. That's how we even get psychometrics, like the personality tests, IQ tests, other things. So that is very sciencey, right? But we are having an embodied experience as we are walking around this planet. So spirituality is really the distinguished difference, the in between of you having a connection to this earth and other things. It's
other people in a sense.
It's becoming, it's at the point at where you become aware of the actual connection itself. That's not the way your body feels. However, it could be that you become aware of how your body feels as you consider that connection.
That would be the impact of the connection, not the connection itself.
Right. So I will say this, my nerdism, and man, it's a serious thing.
You should see how many times he pushes up his glasses.
Right. My nerdism.
Man.
Yeah, not that I'm saying I am a nerd. My nerdism, different. Actually, I'm totally fine with being a nerd. Is studying NDEs, or near-death experiences. And one thing that I learned in the research, and it is research, by the way, it is actual research, is that all of the major medical journals in the world, all of them, have done decades, longitudinal studies on near-death experiencers who have had these things happen, where they claim to have, when they died, they went out of their body and came back. And it is pretty much beyond a shadow of a doubt that like there is something in you that maybe we would call it the soul, that is distinguished from your body enough that when you die, there is something on the other side. And there have been people that don't even believe there's a God or there is spirituality involved in the research of studying this, and everybody's like, yep, it's a thing. This is not a belief, I guess, is my point. Now, how you organize all of that is your own thing. What I'm trying to say is like, well, there is evidence of a distinguished difference between how you're embodied, the connection that goes beyond you, and also psychologically, how you think about it. So considering when you're moving into spirituality, what you're really doing is you're going like, kind of, it's almost like, who am I? But you're saying that in the context of all of the universe, right?
It's more of an existential "who am I," rather than like, "who am I? Oh yeah, this person's son or daughter,"
Yeah, and you can go down that road, right? And that's a perfect avenue to say like, yeah, and what do you mean to all of us? Mm-hmm. That's a spiritual question, right? It's not like and on the one hand, it's not something where you would maybe go with every client if you're a therapist or whatever. But on the other hand, it could be that connecting with that greater nature of what's going on in that moment kind of orients you back into like, well, maybe the thing I'm worried about is actually not that big of a deal. Or maybe I actually do have more of an impact in this world than I thought. I thought I was kind of worthless or whatever, and there's a self-esteem issue. But that's kind of how that connection can be used.
Yeah, so two things that I would like you to take home from this episode. One is you're kind of speaking to that, which is more broadly, if you're a therapist or even if you're a client listening to this, just consider being open to the role of spirituality in the therapy office, in the relationship between therapist and client. Be open to it, because it can certainly play a significant role whether you share the same practices or belief system or whether you don't. Be open to it, because it is playing a role somewhere, and it may be a help or a hindrance in some way to the progress that you're trying to make with this person's treatment. So like if somebody, like I've had numerous clients that we never talked about anything spiritual related, and then years down the road after we deal with some trauma or whatever, they bring up like, hey, can we talk about God? Like, I don't know if that's okay to do here. And I'm like, sure. And they talk about like, I'm angry, like this stuff happened, and I feel better, I'm healed, I've made a lot of progress in this stuff, but I have this like spiritual issue with God for allowing these things to happen in my life or to these people that I love or care about. And that's causing a significant amount of distress in their life that we need to address. And if you're not open to spirituality, then those questions never come onto the table to get dealt with, but they may actually be affecting things. So I'm just saying, simply be open to that, right? And then the other thing is, kind of on the other side of it, is if you are open, don't force it. Like, okay, so it's great if you're open to spirituality. That doesn't mean everybody is, or everybody is ready to right now. And this is one thing I think I've seen in some therapists, is that they want to include that, rightfully so, because you recognize that spirituality is a part of the whole person, like you're describing, Nathan. And they kind of want to bring that into the session and kind of explore that with people. And some people just aren't there yet. Maybe that's not the primary issue that they're focused on. In this case, it might be like, well, I've got an eating disorder and I want to focus on that. And you're like, well, let's talk about your prayer life, or, what's your relationship with a higher power or whatever. I'm like, I don't know. I need to stop binging. Like that might be where they're at. Like they're medically like sick and trying to recover from this issue. And that's just lower on their hierarchy of needs right now. So from that standpoint, I guess what I'm saying is be open to it, but also don't force it on people and go at the pace with where they're at. Because maybe eventually, if you let them know that you're open to it, and they, you may have a conversation in the intake or whatever about their relationship with some sort of spirituality, they might say, yeah, it's important, but not right now, it's not a big deal, or whatever. Just knowing that you asked that question, they might bring it up later on, and it might be a while down the road, like this, one of my clients did, years down the road. But at least knowing that you're open can give them the opportunity to do that when they're ready.
Yeah, so I want to wade into this a little bit because we have a little bit of time here. And I wasn't sure if I would go here or not, but I'll go here in a very broad sense. If you consider how somebody might think, man, I think I want to get prayer for this. I would like to meet with a priest or a pastor or a religious leader or a monk or something, right? The space that a person needs to be in to decide to do that is going to feel very vulnerable. Okay, like that is a decision that typically is not made lightly. It is not the same decision process that somebody uses to decide to go to a counselor. It's an entirely different one because of what we've been talking about, where there is a distinguished difference in spirituality versus even psychology, right? So it makes no sense when you have somebody as a therapist in your session to say something like, you want to pray about that? Like you're moving into a whole different space of vulnerability. Even if that in your mind, because a therapist, that is a good idea because it would be helpful. Okay, well, that's what you believe. And to whatever extent it would be helpful, would probably be in the private time of your own space. Because now what will happen as soon as you bring it up, that person's moving into an entirely different space. And one of those is likely defensiveness.
Mm-hmm. So instead of that, something that you may do, again, if you're open to this and you're recognizing this is a part of it, but you're trying to be respectful of a client, can be just to simply ask a more broad question, like, does this affect any of your spirituality, or if you know specifically that this person has like a relationship with God somehow, you could say like, does this come out in your relationship with God or in your faith at all? Just more broadly. And if the person's like, no, not really, or not that I see, you're like, oh, okay, you can move on, right? And from that standpoint, you're not really inviting them into that space. You're asking if there's a door that they want to go through. And if the client then wants to lead you through that door, they can. And if they're like, click, nope, that door is closed, and click, it's locked, then you're like, okay, that's fine, right? You haven't really done anything that's sort of like evocative for them.
Yeah, part of the issue here that we're really getting at is like, I can't actually think of, I can't think of a religious leader person out there that kind of walks into your business and says, we're going to do it this way now. You go there first, and then they expect that, oh, you probably want these types of things because you're talking to me. And that's kind of the problem with counseling, is that there is no way on average that a person is going to be thinking like that when they go to counseling. So the focus of spirituality really is more about what we were talking about earlier in this episode, which has to do with that connection to the connection, right? The connection to the greater nature of things. And I know some faith people will think, I'm just thinking of how some friends that I have might think like, Nate, you're like making it all like a pantheistic whatever. And that's actually not what I'm talking about at all. I'm literally talking about the fact that you are experiencing the connection to life outside of what your current body is. We just do that. And being able to be aware of that and to be like, whoa, that's like an in-between place, has a lot of power and coolness in and of itself. How you organize it is your relationship to however that is. So, but the fact that you're tuned in to the aspect of it actually can be healing in and of itself.
Yeah, and just as we close up here, one of the cool things is that if you're a therapist and you're listening to this, you probably know that if you've been in practice for a length of time, 5 or 10 years or more, then you've probably learned a thing or two from your clients. You've learned from people about all kinds of things. That's the cool thing. If you're open to this, even as you're doing it to help your clients, you can learn a lot about what spirituality looks like and how people organize it, how they relate to it. And I just think that's really interesting. You learn more about how different people interact with the spiritual world or spirituality very differently. And that, I think, can make you a better therapist, because you're more aware of kind of the nuances of how people are, and you can respond to them in a more, I guess, appropriate way that meets them where they're at, which is effectively making you a better therapist, because that's improving the client-therapist relationship.
Yeah, and in closing here, I would encourage you folks out there that kind of are challenged by this entire thing, but you've had the cojones to listen. Maybe you kind of just don't believe there's a other side of that. And I'd say there's a flavor of one person came in on an intake a while ago. I remember seeing it. It said, I'm a spiritual atheist. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. But just to encourage you, hey, if you are intentionally blocking that off because you're like, nope, like, well, why spend the energy blocking it off, bro?
But also keep in mind that you might not believe that, but some of your clients do, and you might need to open up some space for them to bring themselves into the session.
That's right, baby. Have a great day.
Nice.
Dude, we did well on timing.
Yeah. Export this.
That went pretty well.